Hello. As usual, it's always an adventure with these classes. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me. Hopefully, you can hear me. Hopefully, you can see me. Hopefully, you'll be able to see and hear everything that I have prepared for you this evening. But the robots are being weird, so, what are you going to do? This is one of those things. I was testing stuff a couple days ago. Everything seemed fine. Testing things earlier today. And then, you know, it's just the way it goes sometimes. Um, we've already screwed around for 7 minutes. I was here alone doing that, but, we'll get going. Yay! I'm glad you guys can see me and hear me. Thank you so much for your patience. I don't know what's going on. YouTube, you're messing with me. And I don't like it. But all right, let's get going. Make yourself at home, wherever it is that you are watching this class, whenever in time and space you happen to intersect with this collection of information. Please make yourself at home. Maybe grab something to drink or smoke, a little snack. I recommend grabbing a copy of your natal chart if you have one on hand. Maybe some oracles like runes or tarot. We are going to reference tarot a little bit later in the class, so you might want to have a deck there to study. Or put me on in the background while you cook dinner or wash dishes or, fold your laundry or whatever. You know how best you learn, so make it good and right for yourself. And we will get going here with the actual content in just a minute. Hello, Heathens, by the way. Welcome to not Spinning the Wheel podcast, but Yule. This is the Winter Solstice, the long night in the Wheel of the Year series. I've been teaching this series of classes for 7 years-ish, give or take. Started in 2015 and more or less haven't missed a class. I guess maybe we haven't missed a couple. But, strange days, right? Sometimes we are not in our rhythm as nicely as we would like to be. Hopefully you have yourself a nice drink or beverage of some sort. Excellent. Yay, I'm so glad you guys can see me and hear me. Thank you. Thank you once again for your patience while I wrangled stuff. I was like, why aren't you working right? Why are you messing with me? Because it can. That's why. Yeah, this is a series of classes. As I said, I've been teaching since 2015, and a big part of the work that I am trying to do in this Wheel of the Year series is to help connect modern pagans, 21st century pagans, to the ancient past, the recent past, and the future, right? As well as the now. And how we do that, how we approach that idea and that work is by really understanding our histories, our shared histories, as much as we possibly can, pulling the veil off of urban legends that have woven themselves into modern paganism, appreciating, of course, the people that, made those connections with the information that they had, but where we need to correct it, we need to correct it. But on a note of that, we do talk a lot about archaeological digs and historical findings and historical translations of things. But we always want to hold, in the other hand, people get stuff wrong. So this is what we know to be true right now when we're dealing with things like translations or archaeological digs. And we know as pagans that we are often told incorrect things about our histories, incorrect things about our paradigms, our magical belief systems, and our religious and spiritual practices. So, sometimes archaeology gets it wrong. Sometimes history gets it wrong, especially when it's being written by the winners, right? So we always want to hold in our other hand, this is what we know currently. This is as much as we know currently. That may change in the future. It might turn into something entirely different. And we also know as pagans that sometimes we intuit things and believe them to be true, even though there is no historical evidence or there is no archaeological evidence for it yet. And then Decades down the road, somebody does a dig, and all of a sudden, the myth of matrilineal societies becomes incredibly difficult to disbelieve in the face of civilizations like Hayuk and Göbekli Tepe that were existing 10,000 years ago, clearly matrilineal. So sort of flying in the face of 150 years of old white grumpy Christian men running the archaeology departments of various scholarly institutions. All right, it's 6:12. Let me get on with the class. Because I could go on with that all night. But I don't have to tell you about that. All right. This evening we're going to be talking about Yule and Winter Solstice. In the course of the class, I'm going to talk about goddesses and gods. And I'm going to talk about divine masculine and divine feminine energies. But I want us to always remember that we are never talking about gender or only gender in terms of how in its myriad forms it is expressed in the physical body. That too, and we do see a lot of phallic symbolism or yonic or vaginal symbolism in our ancient past, in the recent past too, in terms of pagan symbolism for holidays and various things in the cultures. But we're also talking about that energy that is possessed and expressed by all living beings. So when we're talking about God energy, or we're trying to embody a deity that identifies as a god or a masculine entity in some way, that is a representation of the energy that's in all beings, that is extroverted, that goes out into the world to go get its stuff, that is that wants to display, that wants to push out and thrust out into the world. And all of us have something in us that does that or is that. And when we're talking about goddesses, sometimes we are talking about females, right? Or femmes. But oftentimes we're talking about an energy, again, that all humans have access to, that is that thing that yearns or pulls in or holds or gestates, that thing in us that calls the God energy out of others. It's not that thing in us that goes after, it's that thing that entices and pulls in. And all of us have the energy in us to draw in or to attract to us in one way or another. We all manifest that stuff in different ways. This person over here might put on a lash and a gorgeous glittery lipstick. That person over there might put on a very handsome leather tie, but they're both doing the same thing. It's that come to me thing, right? Okay. All right, let's not get too distracted with that. But I just wanted to bring us into the 21st century, really, in our language. When we're speaking about this stuff, we don't want to get bogged down in the traditional definitions of things. And of course, if we push back far enough, the traditional definition of things was quite inclusive. The ancients completely understood that humans arrived and manifested in a wide variety of forms and functions. So, okay. Here at Winter Solstice, what are we doing? We are dying. We're dying at Winter Solstice. We are coming to rest, and we are coming into a point and a moment of stillness. We see even our deities coming to a point of rest, a point of dissolution, of death, of stopping or sleeping or stillness in some way. Now, where does this symbolism come from? Why winter solstice? Why not at some other time of the year? Well, for that, we turn to science. And we have here, I've shown you guys these slides in a few other classes this year. So if you've been here a couple times, you've seen these before, most likely. But this is our planet in its orbit around the sun. It's a lie. Our orbit is not a perfect circle. It's a little lopsided, and the sun is not perfectly in the middle, which we'll talk about in just a second. But because of our tilt and because of our proximity to the sun, we have our seasons. And here at winter solstice, we are at the point in our orbit here depicted in this image on the far right, where our North Pole is pointed away from the sun and the South Pole is pointing toward the sun. This creates winter. This creates the tilt of light. Less of the Northern Hemisphere is exposed to sunlight. More of the Southern Hemisphere is exposed to sunlight. So also at this time of year, for all of the folks living in the Southern Hemisphere, they are approaching summer solstice. They are approaching the height of the sun's heat and light, which we love a dichotomy, right? We love a paradox. But here in the Northern Hemisphere, we are experiencing the shortest days and the longest nights. We are experiencing the coldest temperatures, the least amount of light and heat from the sun. And, here's another graphic depicting that. We have at the top the summer solstice. On the left-hand side, we have the spring and fall equinoxes. And on the right-hand corner, we have the winter solstice, another depiction of where the light is hitting, where the heat from the sun is hitting us. So just because of the tilt really is what's up here. And I always love showing this as well. This shape, Analemna, is the shape that the sun makes in the sky as it moves through the year. If we were to take a photo of the sun at noon every single day, it would make this pattern in the sky. It's a little bit smaller on one end, a little bit bigger on the other end, but basically an infinity symbol. I'm sure it's just a coincidence, as we like to say on the podcast. And if you're wondering, very bottom is where December hits. That is where the winter solstice is at the very bottom of the lower loop. Winter or summer solstice, very top. Winter solstice, very bottom. Another depiction of this is here. This is somebody who took a photo once a week at the same time of day, every single day, every single week, and was able to capture this image. If they had taken this picture at noon, it would be straight up and down. If they had taken this picture closer to dawn, it would be pointing towards the left. So that's what's up with that. But here we're seeing our loop around the sun, our tilt depicted in this shape as well. And if you've been with me in these classes, you know we see this shape repeated in several megaliths around the planet. A lot of them have one big circle or oval and then a smaller circle or oval that's nearby. Pretty incredible stuff. Back to that. Okay. So this is, the science basically behind why we are having a winter solstice. But phenomenally, what happens, the astrophenomena of what happens is, if you're here in the Northern Hemisphere, we will see the sun rise in the east and set in the west. Pretty normal stuff. But every day that we get closer and closer to the winter solstice, the sun rises in the east further and further south on the eastern horizon and sets further and further south on the western horizon. And it will do that all year long, from summer solstice all the way to winter solstice. And then what happens at winter solstice? It rises in the east and sets in the west in the same place 3 days in a row. Hey, now that sounds familiar. I don't know if you guys are into religion or like whatever, but that 3-day thing is like a thing in some religions. They're like all about it. Don't point it out to them. They want to act like they just came up with it by themselves. Just let them have it. It's fine. It's fine. But same thing happens at summer solstice. As we move from winter solstice toward summer solstice, right? Days get longer, nights get shorter. At summer solstice, through that process, the sun is moving north on the eastern and western horizons. North, 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 north. And then at summer solstice, it is going to rise and set 3 days in a row eastern horizon, western horizon, at the most northerly point of that process, and then ride very high in the sky, only be gone for a few hours, and we, have lots and lots of daylight, very little nighttime. But here at winter solstice, it's rising very, very far to the south. And as we saw in those graphics that depict where the light is hitting on our planet, the fact that the sun is moving further and further south means that for us here in the Northern Hemisphere, the sun is literally rising lower and lower in the sky every day. If we're at summer solstice, it's riding way high over our heads and it's up there for hours and hours and hours. At winter solstice, it's not up until 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. It's down by 3:30 in the afternoon. Depending if you're up here in Seattle with us, our days are pretty darn short at this time of year. And the sun is very far south in the sky, and it just barely gets up over the horizon and then whoop, right back down again. Well, imagine being a member of one of our ancient pagan civilizations from the last, forever, because as far as we know, this is the only planet our species has ever lived on. So imagine being somebody from the ancient past witnessing this process happening. The sun is your deity, and your deity is rising lower and lower every day. It's later and later every day, and it's getting colder and darker every single day, day after day after day. The plants have stopped growing, and now not only have the plants stopped growing, but they're rotting, and now not only are they rotting, but they're covered in frost, and they're truly decaying. Barely any plants seem to be growing at all at this point in the year, and we are literally witnessing the death, or at least the retraction of this deity, the sun. So this had a profound effect on ancient peoples. And we know, it's pretty easy to tell how profound of effect, because pretty much every single religious or spiritual practice that we know about that has existed in the Northern Hemisphere has a holy day posited on or very close to winter solstice. This is one of the most celebrated times of year by nearly every belief system on the planet, especially in the Northern Hemisphere. Some have big holidays, some have little holidays, some have holidays leading up to the winter solstice, some have them on the solstice, some have them in a form that arches before, during, and after the solstice to kind of like carry you through. And then some have holidays that specifically start after the winter solstice as the sun is waxing, we would say, again, and that light is coming back and getting brighter again. But for 3 days, the sun dies. This is what it was interpreted as by ancient civilizations. The sun dies. And briefly, let me look at this. We've also looked at some of these over the course of the year, but I wanted to bring us back to specifically the Big Sky medicine wheel in Wyoming. This site has been maintained by humans for about 9,000 to 10,000 years. Not only does this medicine wheel mark the risings, the sunsets and the sunrises for the winter solstice and the summer solstice, it marks the sunrises and sunsets for the equinoxes as well. You can mark the moon with this wheel. It also marks the heliacal risings of dozens and dozens of fixed stars. And one of the things that we see with the Native American, the indigenous medicine wheels that we find here in North America, is not only that they mark all of this stuff like lots of other megalithic sites around the planet, but one of the things that these folks do that I think is incredibly cool is instead of using box, and what happens is you can actually change the wheel granularly over time. And that is, in fact, exactly what we see happening. This is the Mayorville medicine wheel, and I believe this is in Alberta, Canada. And this is another wheel that's approximately 10,000 years old. And again, we see lots and lots and lots of little stones, and these could easily be moved by hand to shift from year to what's true for a lot of. Should have changed that to Yule. Don't pay attention to that. But I just wanted to include this because these are the most common shapes that we see in a lot of the medicine wheels here on Turtle Island, aka North America. And how many of these are suns? How many of these are symbols that we see both at summer solstice and at winter solstice? A lot of similar symbolism with these two holidays that celebrate the nadir and the apex of the sun's path through the year. This is winter solstice sunset at Stonehenge. Stonehenge is built in alignment with the winter solstice sunsets, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff. Stonehenge marks a lot of astronomical events. Beautiful shot. Lots of frost on the ground there. Pretty cool. Another shot of Stonehenge in the winter. Absolutely beautiful. And back to our medicine wheel. So, we know that humans have been paying really close attention to this astronomical moment for a very, very long time. I'm not including it in this class. Go back and watch some of the other classes. But we see places like Nabta Playa, which is a stone circle that's in southern Egypt, very, very southern Egypt, that was built about 9,500 years ago, and it marks the winter solstice. So this is something that we have historical evidence that humans have been paying attention to this astronomical phenomenon for at least 10,000 years, give or take. So clearly something really, really important. And again, we know it's the symbol of the deity, and the deity is dying. But the deity also seems to resurrect and return to life and come back again over the course of the next 6 months as the light grows stronger and brighter, and the days incrementally grow longer and longer until we finally make our way to spring equinox, where we have equal night and equal day. And then from that point to summer solstice, the days are longer than the night, and we truly have come back into the bright half of the year. But for now, we are making our way through the underworld journey with our gods and our goddesses that are taking a moment of rest at this point in the year. So, where do I want to go next? I always have so much information to share with you guys, and I'm like, what? Okay. So we talked a little bit about the science. We talked about the meta symbolism of what we're talking about here. I think that I want to talk about a particular group of entities that are really, really potent here at winter solstice. So, I'm jumping around a little bit, but we'll come back to it. If you have the book, work with it. Oh yeah, sorry, patrons. I will upload the latest edition of the book in the calendar tonight after class. I ran out of time. It's been a time. But I'm here now, and we're here now, and this is lovely, isn't it? Thanks for being here with me. But when we are working through Yule, let me say this: our witches work, and we'll come back to this. Actually, let me just go here. Let me just make it easy on myself and do this. Our witches work that we are working with at this time of year. The death and the rebirth of the sun. Pretty straightforward, right? We're seeing this really incredibly graphic depiction of the death and the resurrection of the solar deity in our actual sky. We don't have to imagine it. We're literally experiencing it. We are returning to source at this time of year, and we're going to get back to that. Hibernation, celebrations of light, purification, protection, and divination for community. Okay, let's dive into this protection thing a little bit, because one of the things that we are really working with a lot at Yule is ancestor work. Throughout the long night, we're really doing ancestor work. That starts for some religious systems around the planet, even all the way back during Mabon season when we're pulling in the harvest. It definitely comes through for a lot of folks during Samhain season, because so many of our beloved dead are coming back to visit and hang out. But the beloved dead tend to hang out during winter, and the not so beloved dead too. So we are continuing to do ancestor work throughout winter time. part of that ancestor work is appeasing and trying to help put to rest some of these spirits. But a lot of the ancestor work that we're doing comes under the description of purification, protection, and divination in particular. We're asking our ancestors to come and protect us and to come help us as we make our way through the dark. It's cold, no food is growing, the animals aren't breeding, the predators are really out there and pretty aggressive because they're having a harder time finding food. And so, if we're protecting our livestock, right? And, not to like bring us back into the real world, because we're dealing with witchcraft, it's all about fantasy. Actually, it's not. Witchcraft and paganism is very much about coming back into the world, not escaping it. But we are in quite a dark night. We are in quite a long night here as a civilization right now, dealing with a worldwide pandemic that has been going for 2 years, just about, right? We've been walking through a really dark place in terms of those of us who live here in the United States, with the politics and the general je ne sais quoi of the the general vibe of our country is really dark right now. And then just super casually in the background we have genuine and real environmental collapse happening. This is it's a dark place for us as a species. We're in a long night, both in the season and in these larger cycles that we are in. And so we are looking back and forward to past ancestors, to future ancestors, to alternate lifetime and dimensional ancestors. And we're like, please help. Please send help. We're kind of freaking out. Could you please send some help? And for me, some of our most important and most powerful ancestors that we can work with here at Winter Solstice season are the Evergreens. The Evergreens are a family of plants that have existed on Earth for approximately 300 million years. And they're all over the Northern Hemisphere. They're all over the Southern Hemisphere as well. We often think of the evergreens as just the conifers, and that's plants like pine and hemlock and spruce and cedar and what else? Juniper, sequoia, firs, yews, redwoods, those types of plants. But eucalyptus also can fall into the category of an evergreen, as well as living oak and holly. And of course, the holly king and the oak king play a really big part here at winter solstice. So these ancestors have been here for us for an incredibly, incredibly long time. The oldest fossil record, as I said, is about 300 million years ago. It was found in what we now know as Pennsylvania. And the resin of these plants, we all love to burn. Pine resin, juniper resin smells absolutely incredible. And it's used for protection. It's used to summon and bring through solar energy, patra or father energy, grandfather energy, and ancestor energy in general. But in particular, the resins that are produced by evergreens they fight off insects and they are antifungal, which is cool, but also makes sense, right? And ultimately, this is where a lot of our amber is produced from, are from the sap of conifers. When we look to the various evergreens around the planet, for me, part of what really concretizes them as some of our most important ancestors are their age. As I said, they've been on Earth for a really, really long time. But even the living trees, that qualify as conifers around the planet, all of the world's tallest, thickest, most voluminous, and oldest trees on the planet are all conifers. So there is no tree, or there is no actual picture of the tree I'm about to talk about, but the very tallest tree in the world is a redwood somewhere in California. The tree's name is Hyperion. It is the tallest tree in the world, and there are folks who know exactly where it is, but there are no photographs or videos of it because the location is hidden so that it can't be chopped down, because that's fucking how humans are. But this is just a depiction of how tall it is in comparison to Big Ben and the Statue of Liberty. Tallest tree in the world, a redwood. Okay. The oldest tree in the world. So there's an argument here of who is the oldest, but we have clonal and non-clonal. So a clonal tree is a tree that sort of like grew and died, but sort of replanted itself and kind of grew out of its own thing over and over again. And there is a tree in Japan that is a spruce, so again, a conifer, that is 9,500 years old that has done that. But the oldest non-clonal tree, meaning, I grew here and it's still me and I'm still growing, is a pine that is 4,700 years old. And this tree's name is General Sherman. This is a sequoia, and this is the most voluminous tree in the world, has the most volume of any tree in the world, and the literal widest tree in the world. This is in Mexico City, and it is a cypress. I didn't write its name down. I apologize. But again, just an example of what kind of presence these trees have in their environments. They are massive. They are the oldest, the biggest, the tallest, the widest, and have been here for thousands and thousands of years. I love to think that that pine that is 4,700 years old, older than the pyramids, like older than, half of the world's most famous megalithic sites were built after that tree started to grow. That tree is like, I've been here, I've done that. Like, I'm totally unimpressed with you humans and all of your silly stuff. Yeah, so I speak for the trees tonight. And in folklore, when we look at our conifers, when we look at evergreens, we see them come up in the myths of Jesus, Buddha. We see them in the Kybele or Sybil and Attis cycle. Dionysus has evergreens, and lots of saints are connected to evergreens, and the list goes on and on and on. The great cedar forests of Lebanon, and which horribly enough is down to like 12 trees. It's like this tiny little grove, and yet it was written about in the Bible as like this incredibly important thing, but important only in name, right? Not in actual living. Don't get me started. Okay. We know that, various groves of trees, not always evergreens, but trees in general, have been incredibly important to, belief systems all over the planet. The world tree, Yggdrasil, etc., etc. But for evergreens in particular, the way that they connect in myth and in our spiritual practices, they connect us to our ancestors. They often represent the center of the universe, of wherever the myth is taking place. They often represent or are found in the myths of earth mothers or earth goddesses that are dealing with their dying god sun. Sometimes son, sometimes daughter, usually son. So we have that winter solstice sun, the sun deity, being cared for by a mother, and somehow an evergreen is being incorporated into that myth system as that solar deity is dying. But we also see it in the myths of those solar deities that are going through their rebirth, that come back again and are resurrected again. But two of the myth symbols or archetypal symbols that we see in myth and in folklore connected to evergreens more than anything else is or are protection and loyalty or everlasting love. And that love can absolutely be between two lovers. We do see evergreens come up in like married couple myths. But often it's an everlasting love between the tree and the human. And another thing that I find with a lot of evergreen myths is that oftentimes evergreens are the last entities that a character will meet in a myth after they have been kicked out of a society, or they have lost touch with their group, or they have gone astray from the group. And either they can't find their people, or their people refuse them. Their people push them out and abandon them, or won't take them in. But the evergreens always will. So there's something about evergreens universally, at least through the Northern Hemisphere, in so many different myths and folk tales, where the evergreen is loyal. It connects deeply to history. It's very protective, and it won't refuse anyone. It will always take people in, even when no one else will. And I wonder if that has something to do with, there's a lot of myths that talk about the evergreens being jealous of the trees that get to change their leaf colors, but then they ultimately lose their leaves, and that sort of like, oh, I'm not a part of your group, I'm going to do my own thing. I don't know, maybe that, maybe not, but evergreens profoundly important at this time of year, and we have them in our incense mixes at this time of year and all of that stuff. Even for wassail, right? We're putting juniper berries in our steamy, apple cider drinks that we're making at this time of year. So, and maybe our gin as well. That's another way to stay warm. But evergreens are here to help us through the season. They are incredibly protective. They will shelter your house and your being during wintertime. And in any way, over the course of the season, you can bring evergreens into your house, whether that's a spray or an actual wreath or a tree. Living trees are the best, obviously, so you can plant them outside when the weather gets nicer and the ground thaws. But yeah, I just wanted to, in years past, I've kind of gone in heavy on some of the different gods and goddesses that we work with at this time of year, or like the symbolism around the sun itself. And this year I really wanted to talk about evergreens. I'm not entirely certain why. Maybe because my good friend Rachel, she's really cute and incredibly cool, took me to go make a wreath this year, and we had a ton of fun doing it. It was really fun. It was really cute, but it also smelled incredible. And everything that I touched, I was like, oh wow, this is what it looks like before it becomes incense. And oh, I have, I think about this wood in terms of this sculpture that I've seen that was made out of cedar and all of that stuff. So to be able to connect like religious archetypes that are carved out of evergreen woods, pine or cedar or something like that. And these resins that I love to burn with the living plant, always the absolute best option. And it was just really lovely to do that. So I've just been really like thinking about evergreens ever since. All right. That does not conclude the class by any means. If you thought you were getting out of here, no. Go refill your glass and figure it out. Stretch, change positions on the couch because we have miles to go before we sleep. All right. Briefly, what I want to talk about next is, okay, the other stuff that's here on our Witches Work thing. So we've talked about the death and the rebirth of the sun. We know what's going on with that. Returning to source. This is something that we absolutely see in a lot of our spiritual practices around the world, pagan and otherwise, that winter solstice time is sort of thought of as this coming back to the traditions, coming back to the fundamental wisdom, the fundamental teachings of whatever our belief system is. In Imbolc season, which is, 6 to 8 weeks or so from now, we have an initiatory period. We have one at spring equinox as well. And so this is sort of the preamble to that of like, let me dive deeper. Let me read further in the books. Let me think deeper on these thoughts that I embrace as my belief system. And it really is just like the sun. We're coming back to our source. We're resting. We've come to a point of stillness, and now we are starting up the thing again. Hibernation. As we are having a spiritual trip and sort of reigniting our spiritual curiosity or our interest, we are on the physical plane shutting it down. Now, if you are here in the Northern Hemisphere, you know that our serotonin production drops way down. That's our give a shit chemical that our brain makes so that we give a shit about things. And the brain is like, nah, I don't care anymore, so we're not going to make serotonin anymore. I'm done. Let's just sleep for 6 weeks. It'll be fine. And I kind of go on this rant every year, so why wouldn't I go on it this year? But humans have not been living with electric light for very long. This is a very, very recent phenomenon for our species. It is normal for us to have this dark period. Biologically, our animal portions of ourself, the older portions, we might say the ancestral pieces in us, are much more used to the psychological and the emotional trip of the darkness of winter. And part of that trip is a slowing down, a shutting down, a retracting, a reducing, a constriction of energy in a way, right? We're drawing things in, and we are, not necessarily going out and speaking about ancient times, ancient as of even 200 years ago, right? If we mean the Western world, it's still this way in a lot of places around the world today. It's one of the things that we also forget here in the Western world is how different it is for different places around the world. But when, you're getting up with the sun, so you're getting up later. You're working until it's too cold to work, which means that you're probably ending your workday significantly earlier. And at the same time, there aren't crops to tend. You're not letting the animals out into the fields. Everybody's staying bunched up and warm and, praying that the grain stays dry for the next few months and, and all of that good stuff, right? So hibernation comes along with this reduction of light, reduction of heat, reduction of energy, and the reduction of serotonin. That is also a big part of what is happening for folks who experience seasonal affective disorder. Side note, not a doctor of the cosmos. I'm not trying to be your medical advisor, so don't sue me. But seasonal affective disorder is folks that feel that chemical shift really, really hard. And there are things we can do about it. We can turn the lights on brighter. We can adjust the lighting in our house. We can wear bright colors. Stare at the sun. Don't stare at the sun. But it's a biorhythmic pattern that our animal has been experiencing for millions and millions and millions of years. So if you feel cozier at this time of year, if you feel less driven, if you feel more coz-centric in your energy flow, that is actually totally normal. You are not lazy. You are not slowing down or necessarily getting older. You're just a human whose entire biological history is based on the experiences of this planet and millions, if not billions of years of exposure to these patterns. So, hibernation at this time of year, yes. In whatever ways you can engage that, it's actually really, really important. Not just because of the energy stuff, but because in winter solstice, in winter season, especially as we move out of January and into February and into Imbolc season, we'll talk about this more in the next class, but we are asked to dream. And it's difficult to dream with our eyes open. It's easier to dream when we are drifting in the dark, when we have let go of the physical plane a little bit and we're out there in the stars, or our own inner cosmos, whatever that is. But during Imbolc season, we are asked to dream about what? Well, you have to tune in then. But in winter season, and at winter solstice, we are given an opportunity to bring it to stillness and bring it to that place of quiet so that we can hear. We don't know yet. We'll get to it. Okay. At the same time, we have all these celebrations of light. So yeah, there is some napping, some serious napping. But first, there's a lot of yelling and wassailing and lighting things on fire. Because, hello, paganism. We're not lighting things on fire. Like, come on. You're lucky I'm not on fire right now. I actually am. You just can't see it. But, of course, celebrations of light. And we see that all over the planet throughout religions and spiritual practices, past, present. Celebrations of light, huge here at Yule. And that is very much celebrating the return of the sun. We have those 3 days of stillness where it rises and sets at the same place, and it's very low on the eastern or western horizon to the south, and then it starts to move its way back north again, coming up a little bit higher in the sky every single day. And so these celebrations of light are acknowledging that solar pattern. And then, as we talked about, purification, protection, and divination for community. There are different eras or different moments when we want to engage in divinatory practices in the wheel. And sometimes, especially during Samhain, we are doing divination for community, but we are definitely doing divination for ourself. And during Yule season, this is really a time to tap into our divinatory skills for our people and for the collective. We are reading our fortune in it, absolutely, but how our destiny is maybe tied to the people around us, or our circumstances are tied to the people around us. Because who knew? Mutual aid, it's actually real. So, so understanding how your needs and how the group needs are interwoven and what you guys can do about that, really important at this time of year. Okay, let's move on. As usual, if you're working along with me in the book, we've gone through one page of information, and we are an hour in, because that's how we roll here on the channel. I guess I should say halfway through the class, please, here's an ad for you. Please like this video. If you have not already, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. You will get alerts when the next video is coming up. Leave a comment. The algorithms love that. If you want the book, if you want the slides, and all of the other stuff, the 8-week, 6-week, 8-week calendar that's going to go along with this class, please subscribe to my Patreon at the $9 and up level. You will also get discounts and free readings throughout the year, and lots of other stuff that I add to the Patreon. Too much stuff. Okay, ad over. Moving on. Yule. Other names. And here is where we start to see how Yule sits in the wheel. Yule, Jul, means wheel. And so also another name for this holiday is the wheel. That symbolism will become a little more obvious when we get into the astronomy, astrology section and further on. But really what we're seeing here is the stop and the start and the start and the stop of the great wheel, of time, of the year, of the cosmos, of the constellations, etc. Side note to that, hi, Queen of Tangents, we have New Year's markers throughout the year. So this is yet another stopping and starting point. It's really the best way to think about it, because for a lot of pagans, Samhain is New Year's, right? We call it Witch's New Year's, but also we live in a place that uses the Julian calendar, Gregorian, whatever it is. And New Year's is going to happen December 31st, January 1st, right? And then we look back through time, and tons and tons and tons of civilizations based their new year on the winter solstice marker. The old year ended, and as soon as the sun began to rise up into the sky again, the new year would start. Other systems based in spring. And it was about spring equinox. For other systems, it was about the sun moving into the constellation of Aries, and that's where the year began. And for other systems around the world, past and present, it's about lunar phases or what have you. So we know that we have new years happening throughout the year, but the wheel here is this idea of the cyclical, the infinite, and the stop-start of that cycle, the Ouroboros, we could also say. This is also the Night of Mothers. And that is in respect to the mothers in all of the various belief systems around the planet who are giving birth to the solar deity that is resurrecting and coming back to life, or coming to life initially here at winter solstice. So this is an acknowledgement of all of the holy mothers that are giving birth to the light at this time. Side note to that, we've been talking about these mothers for the last few weeks on my podcast, Spinning the Wheel podcast, and we have seen week after week after week all of these acknowledgments of wisdom goddesses, and that's who these mothers are. They are the mother goddesses that manifest as the crone, aka the embodiment of wisdom or enlightenment, and these enlightened mothers are birthing the light of their various paradigms or their belief systems that they are held in reverence within. The long night, we've talked about that a lot, right? It's the long night. Midwinter, this is definitely thought of as the middle of winter for a lot of pagan cultures. Winter is thought to have started much closer to Samhain and runs through Imbolc season, and so this would be the middle of that cycle. Kalada is the Slavic name for this time of year, and Alban Arfin is the Druid name for this time of year as well. All right, so moving on to the global themes. These are themes that we are seeing past and present in other religious systems around the planet that aren't necessarily pagan in their structure. And what are we seeing? Lots and lots of the same stuff. Rebirth, transformation, an emphasis on ancestors, enlightenment, wisdom, and the birth of solar deities. So we see stuff like during the days of December 20th to December 25th, the birth of Horus from our Egyptian friends and ancestors, the birth of Mithra from our Persian friends and ancestors, the birth of Jesus, not sure if you're familiar with that guy, but he's really, really popular with the Christians. Dies Natalis Solis Invicti. Solis Invicti is the invincible sun, and Dies Natalis is the day of birth from our Roman friends and ancestors. Heliogena, so literally the genesis of Helio, or Helios, the god, the solar god, from our Greek ancestors, and on and on and on. That's just during the days of the 20th to the 25th, and that's just a few from the past and the present. Other holy days that we have at this time, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, the feast of Saint Lucina, or Saint Lucy, which is, or Lucy, who is, their name connects to the word Lucifer. Oh no, yes, it's true. Whose name ultimately connects back to lux, or light. I know, bring that one to the family dinner. Oh! No, do it. and then report back, because I want to hear how it went. etc., right? We have all of these light gods and gods of light and gods of enlightenment, who are being venerated or witnessed at this time of year. Throughout December, we will see festivals and holidays that witness the rebirth of the sun. Saturnalia, really big, popular holiday that happens at this time of year, dedicated to the god Saturn, but ultimately to the death and resurrection of the solar light. From our Shinto friends, we have Toji Tasai. This day marks the end of the sun's decline, the yin period, and the beginning of the growth, or the yang period. In Shinto spirituality, the sun is actually a goddess named Amaterasu. And she is even depicted on their flag as that big red circle. That is the goddess Amaterasu, the sun. So kind of a big deal there. Other holidays, of course, that we have at this time of year, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Haudenosaunee from our Iroquois friends and ancestors. And all of these are recognizing our ancestor work and our enlightenment work and kind of the wisdom of winter spirits coming to bring the wisdom that's going to keep us alive during winter. Okay, moving on to the astronomy of this season. This is our sky guide for the season. The sky guide has on it the meteor showers of the season that are going to be possibly visible, our full moons and our new moons, and our fixed star risings. Not all of them. You'll get the complete list in the calendar. But this is kind of the high points that I think are sort of important for Yule season. In particular, we are having our last full moon of fall on December 18th. So just before we move into Yule season, and the winter solstice, we have this last moment, we have this last full moon. This is a really, really good moon to culminate whatever kind of work you have been doing for fall season and for Samhain season. This full moon really kind of gives you an opportunity to culminate that work and bring it to a head of some sort, bring it to a resolution moment, bring it to a I'm good with this for now kind of a moment, because we're moving into winter, so the energy is going to change and our work is going to be changing its focus. December 21st, the sun will be moving into the sign of Capricorn. That's for tropical or Western astrology, of course. And so the vibes there shift a little bit. We'll talk about that more in just a second. The Quantrids meteor shower this year is actually going to be nicely visible for folks in the Northern Hemisphere if you have decent weather. They run approximately January 1st through 5th, and January 2nd is our next new moon. So really, really good time to check out the that meteor shower. Our first new moon of winter will be at 12 degrees of Capricorn on January 2nd. And so that, for some folks, really kicks off the season when we have our first new moon. So that's when it's falling. January 4th is where we hit the perihelion. And the perihelion is that place in our orbit, Earth's orbit, around the sun, where we are actually the furthest away from the sun. We are the closest to the sun. Sorry. At winter solstice, even though the North Pole is pointed away from the sun, and it creates this tilt that really cools off the top half of our planet, the Northern Hemisphere. And then we experience winter, and even though the light is dimmer and it appears that the sun is going away, we are actually the closest to the sun that we get in our orbit. It is at summer solstice that we are the furthest away in our orbit. And I think that is really beautiful imagery and a really beautiful metaphor, that here in the dark, we are actually closest to the heart of our solar system and closest to our source. Pretty true, honestly. It's a pretty great metaphor to work with, because if you've ever had, if you've ever done anything spiritual, it's really kind of like that, isn't it? We're the closest to the thing when we are the most totally baffled and feel the most lost. January 6th, we have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Vega. And then January 17th, we have our first full moon of winter season, and that's going to be at 27 degrees of Cancer. And then January 19th, the sun moves into Aquarius. And for me, somewhere in those last 10 to 12 days of January is where I feel like we really move into Imbolc season. We leave the Yule moment and we kind of move into the Imbolc vibes, and those last 2 months of winter kind of, or 6 weeks or whatever of winter sort of present themselves. But I always like to mark, like, when does Aquarius show up? Because for me, that's sort of the unofficial, official ending of Yule season. All right, here are the constellations that we're working with. Sagittarius in the west, on this side of the screen. On this side. And then Capricorn to the east. And there aren't too many important fixed stars in the constellation of Sagittarius, but Nunkey is definitely one of the ones that there's a lot of interesting information on the internet about with like interdimensional beings and stuff. So reader beware, your mileage may vary. But it does have some pretty cool myths connected to it. And then we move into Capricorn. I don't have anything too fancy to say about any of these guys. But what I do have to say about this portion of the sky is that it is connected to a thing that we find in some religious and magical traditions called the Gate of Man and the Gate of God. And the Gate of Man is found on the opposite side of the sky between the constellations Gemini and Cancer, where summer solstice is. And the Gate of God is found here. Metaphorically, it is between Sagittarius and Capricorn, but because of the precession of the equinoxes, it technically has moved. So magically, it still sits, it's still imagined to be between Sagittarius and Capricorn. But the Gate of God connects to the center of our galaxy, which is a black hole called Sagittarius A. And again, because of the precession of the equinoxes, or because of our movement within our galaxy as a solar system, the sky changes over time. And so now the center of the galaxy is a little closer to the beginning of Sagittarius. It's actually more between Sagittarius and Scorpio than it is between Sagittarius and Capricorn. All the same, the magical symbolism here is really about at the gate of man, between Gemini and Cancer. This is where souls come in to be incarnated here on the physical plane. And after a person has died, it was imagined that their soul would shoot out at winter solstice by some religious traditions. The Egyptians were really big into this idea, and would be sent to the Gate of God here between Sagittarius and Capricorn. Let's see, what else do I have to say about this time of year for our astronomy stuff? The first full moon after Yule is called Old Moon. Rude, but all the same. Kids these days. And yeah, that's it. We've had a series of eclipses and like solar and lunar eclipses at this time of year, but that has moved because the nodes have changed. They are just about to leave Sagittarius and Gemini and move into Taurus and Scorpio. We'll talk about that more in the coming year when we come around to Beltane season. We'll be talking about the eclipses that we're going to experience during Taurus season. But for now, I think this is all I have to say about the astronomy, so let's move on to the astrology. A little reading for you out of the book. Okay. So I do include a lot of information about Sagittarius for Yule season because, well, Sagittarius, we've talked about this before. Sagittarius, it's kind of the best sign. I'm not supposed to say that, like, officially as a witch. We're supposed to, like, keep certain things under wraps. But we're cool. I can share this with you. It's kind of the best. So I talk about it. I talk about it a lot. But I also talk about it because it comes at the end of Samhain season. And I feel like it kind of gets blown out of the water a little bit by all that Scorpio imagery that we work with. And then we move into Yule, and it's Capricorn season. But there's so much of what we're doing with our Sagittarius symbolism that actually still applies at winter solstice and the several days after. So, technically speaking, our new moon in Sagittarius and our full moon in Gemini are always going to fall within Samhain season somewhere. But sometimes, especially like this full moon in Gemini, they fall really, really close to the winter solstice. And so we're still doing some of that work at this time of year. When we are working with this full moon in Gemini, as the year ends and begins, we are listening for, we are recording, and we are receiving on others' behalf messages and information from the multitudes of dimensions just beyond the veil. Remember what I'm saying? We're doing divination work for the group. Gemini is here to receive the message. Gemini is here to talk about it and to deliver the message. Remember, Gemini is ruled by the planet Mercury, who is a psychopomp and has the capacity to go to heaven and hell, the worlds of the gods and goddesses, the worlds of the lands of the dead, and all points in between, and to deliver the messages back and forth. So, we have somewhere always here leading up to winter solstice a full moon in Gemini that's here to help us with that imagery and that symbolism. For that Sagittarius jam, Sagittarius, of course, is ruled by the planet Jupiter, and Sagittarius in and of itself is a very religious and philosophically minded sign. So there is already sort of this energy throughout the last month leading up to winter solstice of the fraternity of man, as it were, though those are extremely gendered words to use. So we can say the family of humanity within the auspices of our belief systems, our philosophies, our moral practices, our ethical practices, and our religious customs and our spiritual traditions. These are all sort of coming up to the surface at this time of year, which of course, right? We have, again, as we've said, who knows how many cultures throughout time have had this great reset for the great matriarchs and patriarchs and leaders and genesis, icons, basically, of their belief systems, of their whole paradigms. So yes, there is this. Close your eyes and relax for a moment before we get back into the heady bit of it all. As we move into the last weeks of fall and on to Sagittarius season, foggy nights, frozen mornings, and waning sunlight begin to guide us away from the jump shock of funhouse carnival mask death and into the real spirit of death. Stillness, void, and ultimately reunion with the source. We have either hit the reset button at Samhain or we hit it now. Time and life stop and take a couple breaths, and then begins anew. Make sure that you take time to do the same. Our naked branches are encrusted in silver ice, glittering, frozen, stretching towards a blank sky. At winter solstice, the light hits its lowest point, which means it's only up from here. The Oak King has risen again with the reborn sun, sternly carrying the wisdom of the ages. The Holly King has frozen to death on some blasted ridge, hung up on thorns in his velvet frock while looking for berries out of season. We nurture and care for ourselves and our home, but more from a grim survival aspect than any warm instinct. We follow traditions, not from a sentimental urge, but because this is what kept people alive last time the village faced winter. We look across the wheel at the goddess, lounging, in the warm, verdant abundance of the high part of the year. How very far away she seems now. Winter may call on us to make hard choices. The energy of Yule can drive us to focus on the function and the tenacity of a thing. The physical world security taking precedence over comfort or loving solutions. Do not become hard like ice and stone during Yule, but have respect for their longevity. Consider what must be sacrificed by one who would be immortal, one who would be eternal. What heritages do you stand on? If you have your natal chart with you, I recommend checking out what houses in your natal chart are connected to the signs of Sagittarius and Gemini. We're leaving those. And what houses in your chart are connected to Capricorn and Cancer. Because that's where our moons are going to be for winter solstice season. So we want to know where are we starting things, where are we bringing into a culmination of sorts, that type of stuff. If you have lots of things in Capricorn or Cancer, this winter solstice season might be a really intense time of year for you. Maybe think back to last year and the year before. What is it like when the sun and Mercury and Venus and the moon all travel through this part of the chart, because they all tend to hang out together. Is this time of year especially intense for you? Or what? So our astrology can really help us get in tune with that biorhythm as well. All right. Okay, before I turn the page, let me talk a little bit about the Capricorn and the Cancer moons. New moon in Capricorn, full moon in Cancer. So this new moon at the beginning of winter really sits with that starting at the start kind of energy. Capricorn is a cardinal sign. They love to start stuff. They love to initiate or instigate or begin the thing. And so as the sun and this new moon happen in Capricorn, our attention is pulled towards the responsibilities, the purposes, the duties, the structures that make life possible, right? So we really have to think about, in Capricorn season, what do I need to do to stay alive? What do I need to do to keep my people alive? On the new moon in Capricorn, we examine our feelings and our ambitions. We examine our feelings around powerlessness, right? Power and lack of power. Inclusion and exclusion, right? What a time of year to be included in something. Think back 500 years ago, what it would be as like a vagabond traveling through a village, and you know that winter is coming and you are not going to live if you have to stay outside, and someone chooses to include you, right? Now imagine that same moment and someone chooses to exclude you. And those are our ancestors. Those are our ancestral experiences that we've had. So that stuff comes up for us in this lifetime, in this season, every single year. We want to know what those voices are saying to us so that they're not ruling us from the shadows. What are those fears? Regardless of how illogical they are in the face of our credit cards and our electric lights and our Wi-Fi, what are those ancestral fears that are coming up for us at this time of year? Capricorn really helps bring voice to those fears. They can feel very certain about what they think is right. And those fears are what kept an ancestor alive, right? But we may not be in physical danger, but we might feel like it. and so it's important to call that stuff out in us and say, hey, no, you don't get to run me from the shadows. When we're working with our full moon in Cancer, we are considering the ever-changing face of our own creative power and how that ebbs and flows. So it's that moment of thinking about us as the sun that has died and is now coming back. What does that feel like in us? Where does my creative power flow? Where does it fade? What are those cycles for me? What does that feel like? All of that good stuff. Okay. Um, yeah, let's go to tarot. Like, what are we doing? Oh, yeah, witchcraft. I almost forgot. We will be talking about lots of this stuff in much more depth than what I can get into in just a measly 2-hour lecture in the weekly podcast, Spinning the Wheel podcast, available on all platforms that distribute podcasts, I think. But we will get much more granular on a lot of this stuff, like this full moon in Gemini that's coming up in a couple of days. Okay, moving on to tarot. So we have a lot of options when it comes to Yule season in working with tarot and tarot symbolism. First off, you can pull these cards out and just meditate on them and enjoy them. That can be a ritual in and of itself. That can absolutely be a winter solstice ritual in and of itself. You can also use these cards and the images that are depicted on them as archetypes for your altar. If you need these these entities or illustrations, they're entities. It's tarot is alive. We all know that, but they can stand in for gods and goddesses. They actually do a really good job at it. And so, if you can't afford to go buy a sculpture, or you don't like using statues on your altar, for example, you can always use tarot to stand in for those images. I think that it's a really easy and cheap way of doing it. And so, my initial tarot helpers that I recommend working with are the Temperance card and the World card. Temperance connects us to the sign of Sagittarius, and the World card connects us to the sign of Capricorn, or excuse me, the planet of Saturn. And why I like these two in particular rather than the sign and the sign, or the planet and the planet, is that Temperance is the angel that's sort of overseeing our enlightenment process. And the planet Saturn is here to help us ground in a process that is very exhilarating and lifted up and out. So it's really easy to get sort of taken away or carried away by the process that Temperance is suggesting. And Saturn is here to help root us and ground us in a process that's very spiritual and expansive. It's also, of course, in the round of the laurel leaves, the wheel, right? And that idea of the Ouroboros and this being sort of this eternal process that has these various pieces to it and all of that good stuff. But we can also work with these guys all together. So we could just work with Sagittarius and Saturn, or we can work with Sagittarius and its ruling planet, Jupiter, and Capricorn and its ruling planet, Saturn. This deck that we are looking at here is the painted version of the Builders of the Aditum Tarot. This is one of my absolute favorite tarot decks under the sun. If you buy a copy of this deck, it should be very inexpensive, and it will be in black and white, and you are encouraged to paint your own cards to develop a very intimate relationship between yourself and the images on the cards. I absolutely love this deck. Side note, the minor arcana are just pips cards. They are not illustrated in the way that the Pamela Coleman Smith Waite or Rider Waite tarot deck is. Pamela Coleman Smith is the person who illustrated those cards. And so before that, pretty much every tarot deck under the sun just had pip card for the minor arcana. It was Pamela Coleman Smith, a queer woman of color, who drew all of those illustrations and came up with that symbolism. Hello. Okay. Hello. But I love working with this deck because the symbolism on the major arcana is incredible. So what do we have here? On the outside, we have, or on the far left, we have Sagittarius under a rainbow holding both water and fire over the lion and the eagle. That's the representation for the sign of Leo, and the eagle is a representation of the sign of Scorpio. And so we are bringing water to fire and fire to water. We are standing both on water and on land, etc., etc. We talked a lot about the symbolism of the Temperance card in the Samhain class, so go back and check that out. But this is the angel that sort of oversees our spiritual process, is probably the easiest way of putting that. And next to that is the Wheel of Fortune card. And this is the card that connects to the planet Jupiter. We can feel like we are a little lost in the process sometimes when we are working with this card, but ultimately this card is a reminder of the fact that we are in a process and it is never ending, and it is about our improvement and our own personal enlightenment. Like all the stuff that we experience in this lifetime ultimately can contribute to our soul's evolution and our personal enlightenment. Next to that, we have the World card, which connects to the planet Saturn. And we see an androgyne person here in the center. And this imagery is cool and possibly problematic at the same time. So let's just get that out of the way and say it. Because in some tarot decks, humans are typically male or female. And then occasionally we see humans that are a blend of those two things. And that is how it is intended in the deck. The symbolism is saying there is man and there is woman, and then there is occasionally this thing that's a blending of man and woman. And that is absolutely not taking into account all of the other iterations of gender and humanity and expression and all of that stuff. There absolutely are decks that depict this imagery in different ways. And for me, I choose to see this card as representing a thing that is beyond man or woman. That it's like moving into another dimension. It's moving into another thing that is beyond that whole construct. That's part of why they have wands in both hands, because hello, we love a double dong. Okay, yeah, I said that. We're moving on. But let's focus on some other stuff that's happening on this card, like the animals that are in the corners being exactly the same as the creatures that are in the corner of the Wheel of Fortune card. Note the Hebrew letter in the bottom right-hand corner of the Wheel of Fortune card. That is the same shape as the purple cloth that the person is wearing in the World card. So we know that there is some really intimate connection here between Jupiter and Saturn. And, more so than maybe we have time to get into in this class, but basically these are the great expander and the great contractor coming together on whatever it is that's happening for us here at Winter Solstice. And then on the far right, we have the Devil. Everybody's favorite card. Everybody's always really excited to see this card. No, that's not true. Oftentimes this card really freaks people out. But the Devil is absolutely here as a boundary, as an edge, and is very much a reminder. The Devil connects us to the sign of Capricorn. Capricorn is an earth sign. And during Capricorn season, we have to get really real with ourselves about what are we going to have to do to survive. And how loving we can be in that process seems like it gets tested, right? We talked about that earlier in the astrology portion. So the Devil here is really saying, like, where do I have to create loving boundaries, not just with my community, not just with my people, but with myself? And where am I getting too out of hand in terms of being a curmudgeon? Where am I getting too security minded? Where I'm being too precious with my resources, and conversely, where maybe do I need to have better boundaries and be a little more safety minded, be a little more scarcity aware? Not based in scarcity, but aware. That stuff. It's tough work that we get asked to do in Yule season because we are being asked to stand with one foot in the world of God and connectivity and joy and, soul union and all of this really great stuff. And then we're also being asked to stand with one foot in a world that is physically dead. Light that is very low, very little heat, very little food, very little warmth, that like freaks us out on a fundamental genetic, biorhythmic, psychological level, right? And at the same time, I'm supposed to somehow be embracing my fellow man, my fellow humans. I'm supposed to somehow be holding, as I was saying before, the fraternity man or the family of humanity. And I'm faced with mortal death, right? It's spooky stuff. It really asks a lot of us as humans. It asks a lot of us as pagans. And it's a huge part of why we want to engage in so many of the joy practices that Yule and Winter Solstice provide for us. It's why we want to engage in our divinatory practices. It's why we want to come back to our spiritual traditions, and also be doing our ancestral work, because it is, all of that stuff is saying, don't freak out, don't freak out, don't freak out. Do these things and they will keep you protected. Do these things, they will keep you warm. Do these things, they'll keep you healthy and safe. Don't get scared, don't get scared, but adhere to the traditions. Adhere to the traditions. All right, I needed to look you in the eye while I said that part. Let's go back to the tarot. So these are our major arcana that we can work with if we want to have deities or archetypal figures out on the altar or the work table or whatever it is that you work with at home, if in fact you create magical workspaces like that. And then also for study, meditation, ritual work, what have you, here are the Rider-Waite or the Smith-Waite cards. Again, we have Capricorn and Saturn, Devil and World for our major arcana. And then for the minor arcana, we are working with the 2, 3, and 4 of Pentacles. And again, Capricorn, cardinal sign, we're just getting started. So there is this real emphasis of we are finding stability, we are following the blueprint, we are following the plan, and we are staying focused on securing and maintaining the physical plane and the needs of the physical plane. Food, shelter, that kind of stuff. That's what's up with these minor arcana cards. A little bit of reading for you as you meditate upon these. Actually, I'm going to put it back to here. Yeah. At winter solstice, we can see the curve of time. If a wheel has an end and a beginning, it might be here. When we can see out across time, we can remember that this is all a grand cycle with a beat and a pulse and a flux. Nailed to the center of the wheel, we descend, we ascend, rinse, repeat. We are thrust into the fiery forge, plunged into the quenching waters, and then hammered over and over. If we keep our eyes closed and we forget that this is an infinite cycle, we will grow scared and we will act from a place of fear. But through repeated experience, through trial, we can learn about ourselves and the world. We let go of the things that weaken us. We adapt. We reconcile. Eventually, we have gained and earned wisdom and understanding, and we remember the devil and the angel are really the same being, our partner in the cosmic dance of existence. The excitement of spiritual enlightenment is easily tarnished and blocked out by the doldrums of real life. And existence can seem like a burden that grows heavier by the year. As we age and gain wisdom, we must fight off cynicism and discover a way to retain our passion. It is easy to get lost in the struggle of life and to forget that we must find joy in our efforts. But without some discomfort, some dissolution, and some disorganization, we may never be motivated to evolve up and out of what has been handed to us. And without restriction of the personal will and the base urges and fears of the animal mind, we will never advance as a species. Somehow we must find an accord between our finite and infinite selves, and between ourselves and the community and the cosmos at large. Okay, let us move on to the next thing, which is oh yeah, cool. Okay. All right, yeah, I put good stuff in here. So those are our tarot helpers. Okay, so let's finally come around to some actual paganism, shall we? It is in the title. I guess I should talk about witchcraft. But the reason why I go off on all of this stuff is so that when we come back around to, oh, put this in the wassail, or this particular traditional practice or that particular, we know what the connections are. We know what the historical connection is, the ancient practice of why this thing is happening, right? Why are we lighting candles at winter solstice? Well, let me tell you a story about the sun, right? Exactly that. Okay. So for our ritual forms, we are gathering with friends and family. Yes, that absolutely is a ritual form at Yule season, particularly for multi-day celebrations. Like come in, hang out, do the thing. Now, side note, right? COVID. So, don't be stupid. Don't be spart. I just said that. Don't be stupid. You're not new. You know what's going on. Put your mask on. If you can get vaccinated, get it. If you need a booster, go get it. If you can't get vaccinated, I understand. I'm not having that argument with you. I get it. I know that there are folks out there it's not safe for. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking about if it's safe for you, please go get vaxxed. Wear your mask. Wash your hands. If it is at all possible, and spoiler, it is, put on a big heavy coat, 2 pairs of socks, an extra pair of gloves, 5 scarves, and go stand outside in the yard, or go pull up a lawn chair and hang out in the yard and hang out with your friends or your family. If you've got to see people this season, do it outside. Do it in big giant rooms with lots and lots of ventilation. But even that isn't safe enough. We know this. Does it suck? Yeah, it sucks. It absolutely sucks. But the more we are willing to put ourselves through some temporary inconveniences, the more likely it is that we're all going to be here to hang out when this shit passes eventually. Okay? I want to party with you in person as soon as I absolutely can. If you're dead, I can't do that. So wear your mask, wash your hands, hang out with people outside. But getting together with family and friends is a traditional thing at this time of year. Do it virtually. We can do this in the 21st century. We've got lots and lots of ways of adapting. Wassailing and caroling, also a really big thing at this time of year. Going around singing songs outdoors from house to house, absolutely. And of course, wassail. I have a really yummy recipe for wassail in the book that incorporates, beer, obviously, lots of fruit, allspice, junipers, lots of good stuff, and talks a little bit about the history of wassailing and the different forms of that you can find from place to place and from era to era. Jumping a bonfire, always a big hit with pagans. It's an opportunity to set things on fire. Yes, please. Charitable acts at this time of year, absolutely ritual form, 100%. Kissing under mistletoe, we would be remiss to not mention that. Divining the new year, as we've already talked about quite a bit. Filling the house with light, also talked about that a lot. Taking time to be alone, that speaks to the hibernation or the hibernatory element of Yule and Yule season. Making sure that you are taking time to be with yourself, to be still, to be silent, and to just be at peace for a moment. I know that our world is quite hectic, and literally shutting it all down is not possible for a lot of folks. So even if that time to be alone is a locked bathroom door and an hour-long soak in the tub, whatever you can do for yourself. Really, really important. Just try to carve out some time in whatever way you can. Maybe that's a nice long walk with your headphones plugged way, way in, but no music on. Just being in your own little space. On that note, walking in wild places, and I will recommend that for every single Sabbat, to actually go out and witness the earth, witness the changes that are happening, smell the difference in the air, smell the difference in the dirt, look at what the trees are doing, look at what the atmosphere is doing, all of that. Nothing like the reverence for the actual physical world for us pagans, 100%. And reaffirming our spirituality, whatever that means for you. Whatever that means for you, all of those words, reaffirming our spirituality, whatever reaffirming might look like to you, whatever spirituality is for you right now, to come back to that. And another way that we might approach that work is just considering your spirituality. What have you been taught in this lifetime about spirituality? What were you taught as a kid? What were you taught as a young adult? What did you find out there? Were you exploring? Have you been exploring maybe now or at other eras of your life and you've read this or that? It's not necessarily a time to go back and disbelieve or believe, but a really powerful time to just go back and consider, I used to believe this. I was taught to believe that. Interesting. Just that. It's a wonderful time for that kind of reflection. The symbols that we are working with at this time of year on our altars, on foods that maybe we're making, if we're doing, painting or making something like an altar cloth or a wall hanging, or maybe you wanted to make cards for people, all of these would be absolutely appropriate symbols to work with. You could wear it on a t-shirt, wear it as a piece of jewelry, whatever. The rising sun, specifically, sun rises. That idea of the sun at its lowest point, but going up. Fires, candles, lanterns, and literally any and all sources of light. Twinkle lights, absolutely. They should totally be on this list. They 100% count. The Yule Log, that is one of the things that I absolutely talk about every single year, and we didn't talk about it this year. The Yule Log, very much in the flow of the evergreen stuff. I was really focused on talking about evergreens as ancestors, as like living entities, and not thinking about burning their bodies. So, but yes, the Yule Log, absolutely a thing. Go back and watch last year's class, because I really go in hard on the traditions around the Yule Log. But TLDR, one tradition was to find a tree that was tall enough that when you chopped it down and stuck the top of it in the fireplace, the bottom would stick out the front door, and supposedly you're leaving the front door open the whole time as you're slowly moving the log into the house. I was like, yeah, right. No, pagans would do that. Yeah, no, I believe that. That happened. 100%. Evergreens, as we talked about quite a bit in this class. Spirals. And in particular, double spirals, spirals that go into the center and then come back out again, because that is absolutely mimicking that process of the sun going into the center, going into the dark, and then spiraling back out and opening back up again. Spinning wheels, literally wheels that spin, but also spinning wheels like to spin wool. And that imagery connects us to the wheel and the gears of the universe, the gears of the cosmos. The spinning wheel is a symbol of the goddess, in particular crone goddesses and goddesses connected to wisdom. And the imagery of the spinning wheel and that spun wool is going to become even more important as we move into Imbolc season, but it definitely starts here. And then the goddess in white, the goddess as the frozen queen of winter, Fela Amor, the goddess of the frost, the goddess of death, the goddess as the frozen, blasted earth. All of these are very appropriate symbols. Before we get into the meditations, if you are making an altar for yourself this year, I recommend, actually, let me do it this way. I don't know why I put that there. It's a weirdo. Here are here are animal helpers that are appropriate for your altar. And again, you can work with these symbols however you want to. They can be pictures, they can be figurines, they could be things on your clothing, things on your jewelry, whatever, like movies that are themed around these things, like however you want to incorporate and work with all of the helpers that we're about to go through. So any and all of these are totally appropriate to include on your altar. In particular, creatures that turn white at this time of year because they're sort of going into their winter form, right? Yeah. Food and drink for this time of year, especially things like cinnamon, clove, allspice, nutmeg, apples and oranges, and ginger in particular, very, very important in our wassail celebrations and recipes. Oranges, of course, are the symbol of the sun. And so, as a kid, I always got an orange in the bottom of my stocking. And when we're using them in drinks, we want to cut them sideways in big discs so they look like a wheel with spokes radiating out from the center, much like our medicine wheels and all of our other solar symbols that we're working with at this time of year. Really, really cool stuff. Other things that are appropriate for our food and drink are pickled and fermented foods. And this is stuff, ham and other salted meats as well, kind of qualifies for this, and some of our meads and ales, but really that sort of falls under the fermented foods. This is all stuff that we grew and picked and harvested in Litha season, in Lughnasadh season, or in Mabon season. So that high part of the sun, we are now bringing those foods out of the cupboards, out of the basement, out of the wherever we've been storing our canned peaches and things like that. We are bringing that stuff back out, and so we're eating the sun energy that we stored and collected at the highest part of the year. That's where a lot of this stuff is coming from. Incense and oils, these are completely appropriate to wear and absolutely appropriate to be burning during our Yule rituals or to be giving as gifts as well. Our evergreens, huge family of evergreens. European sage, really important. Bayberry, also very important. That's also aka myrtle, I believe, is bayberry. Frankincense, as well as the combination of frankincense and myrrh. This is a super duper traditional scent to burn at Yule season and Winter Solstice. However, the combination of frankincense and myrrh can be very triggering for some people because the Catholic Church burns a lot of it. They really go ham. And so some folks are like, I can't handle that smell. Copal, Copal, copal is absolutely a resin that is totally appropriate to replace frankincense with. And instead of myrrh, you can absolutely work with something like jasmine. It is very not of the season in terms of a scent tied to this time of year, but it is very yin, very feminine, very watery, very goddess centric, like myrrh is. So energetically, jasmine is a nice enough replacement for myrrh. But also, again, incense and oils, cinnamon, clove, oak moss, bay laurel, rosemary. These are all totally, totally appropriate to use at this time of year. Sachets, incenses that you might be making to pass out to people, stuff you just want to burn to make the house smell good. All of this is very appropriate for this time of year. Mineral helpers that we can work with. This is stuff that we can have on our altar, or jewelry that we might wear throughout the season. Lapis Lazuli in particular, very connected to Capricorn and Sagittarius. But it's one of the great holy stones that are out there. So it really connects us to a lot of deities. Turquoise as well connects us to a lot of deities and brings us into that Sagittarius energy. Labradorite, also really potent to work with. That's a new stone for humans to work with, but very appropriate for our divination work. Any kind of divinatory practices that we might be doing. Labradorite is always going to be assisting us with that. And for that protection energy that we were talking about so much with our evergreens, stones like obsidian, black tourmaline, smoky quartz, jet, those are really fantastic stones that are very protective, they're very securing, they're very grounded and stabilizing. And so if this is a season that kind of destabilizes you, you feel like you can't find your footing here, any of those black stones are going to be really, really super helpful with that work. If you feel good about this and you are wanting to step into your spiritual work, your occult work of the Yule season, lapis is definitely going to assist you. Turquoise is definitely going to assist you. And so is the azurite. And I guess tiger's eye really is good for that as well. The other ones just look cool. Okay, plant helpers, as we talked about several times already, are evergreens, of course. But also things like thistle, mistletoe, poinsettias, laurel, holly and oak, of course, oak, ash, and thorn, of course, and ivy. These are not necessarily conifers, but a lot of these are evergreens in the sense that they just don't die off in the winter, or they may lose a few leaves, but the plant does not go dormant. And there is a living oak that lives through winter that stays green throughout the year. Of course, for pagans, holly and oak connect to two really important forms of the god energy. And so when we have these two plants on our altar, especially here at Winter Solstice season, we are acknowledging the shift of energy from the Holly King, who has been reigning from summer solstice till now, who is now defeated or killed or blinded or thwarted or stopped in some way by the Oak King, who then takes over as the form of the wise elder portion of the god energy that we work with. And it will run the show, or they will run the show from winter solstice to summer solstice. And so just in these two plants, we have these two really powerful archetypes and paradigms. We don't have to have a statue on our altar. We don't have to have a picture even on our altar. We can literally have a leaf of oak and a leaf of holly and have these incredibly powerful gods represented on our altars or our workspace in a way that's really powerful to us and doesn't necessarily have to mean anything to anybody else. I always love that kind of stuff. I think it's really, really cool. The wheel. These wheels were designed by my incredible friend, Ryan Jack Allred. Check him out. He has a wonderful website. He's a fantastic illustrator. And all of these wheels that you see on the books were designed by him. Let me scooch back to our meditations for the season. Okay. These are our meditations for Yule. You can use them in a Yule ritual if you like. You could also use them during just like journal entry for yourself as you move through the season. If you do make an altar, I don't know why I don't have this in here, but if you do make an altar, you can go with an all white altar, right? As if it was completely covered in snow. You could do a deep blue and silver and white combination, very appropriate, speaks to that frozen goddess energy. Bright reds and oranges and yellows for the return of the fire, the return of the sun. You could also go with bright reds and bright greens, which depict our evergreens with their bright red berries and all of that good stuff. And you can bring in these colors with anything that you like: cloth, candles, items, plants. One of my favorite things to do every year is to make a piece of art. And sometimes that becomes my altar cloth, or it's a cloth. It's a piece of paper, but sometimes I hang it on the front of the altar. And usually it's something really, really abstract. I just get a pile of colors together and make a big mess. And just have that abstract collection of colors there to remind me of those energies that those colors represent. So that stuff. Okay. For our Yule meditations, light is overcoming darkness. What is the light that you shine in the world? What symbols and archetypes and traditions from this time of year convey an idea of holiness to you? And we have lost and gained much this year. What deep wisdom have you earned? And how will you use it going forward? That is possibly the deepest gift of Yule and winter season, is recognizing how far we have come over the last year, whatever the year has presented to us, and giving ourselves a moment to be still and to look back at all that we have done, all that we have lost, all that we have gained, all that we have learned and unlearned, all the skins that we have shed, and then to look forward into who knows what the next year is going to bring. And to allow ourselves this moment of stillness, this moment of peace, this moment of an inhale and an exhale, and just stopping for a second to reflect, to ponder, and to not do anything at all, to just be at peace and in stillness for a moment before we move on with the next portion of the process. It'll be right there waiting for us whenever we're ready to pick it up. So in whatever way you can, I know I've already said it a few times in the class, but I really do mean it. In whatever way that you can, provide yourself a moment, an hour, an afternoon, a whatever. On winter solstice is lovely, but really during winter solstice season. So that's the end of December and pretty much all of January. Find time for yourself. The new moon on January 2nd might be a really great time, right? It's right after the new year, December 31st, to just bring it to a halt. Pull the whole car over, as we like to say on the podcast. All right, my friends, that is winter solstice. That is our Yule class for this year. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to everybody who has held me through a really wild fucking year personally. Not as bad as some people, but it's also not a contest. I didn't have a great year, but here we are on the other side of it. 2022 is probably just going to be more of the same, honestly. Let's not fool ourselves. And then be pleasantly surprised if it's any better. Right? Thank you so much for joining me here. Thank you so much to my patrons, you crazy motherfuckers, I swear to God, all of them, literally, all the gods. You folks, you donate money, and I really appreciate that part. But it's the fact that you believe in me and you believe in this work and it's doing something for you. That is the thing that really trips me out and fires me up and gets me going every day. So thank you so much to my patrons and my students who work with me. And yeah, what a hell of a year, guys. If you would like to work with me, I do tarot readings, astrology readings. I do pagan spirituality consultations, magical consultations. I have a tarot mentorship program. I will be offering some introduction to tarot workshops in the coming year very quickly. I also have a Patreon where you can work with me. I offer live classes like this one and so many more. I have a weekly podcast called Spinning the Wheel where we really break all of this material down into the granular level. And I have a newsletter and a blog on my website. If you're not ready to commit yet, I totally understand. Thanks, guys. I hope you have a fucking fantastic winter solstice in whatever way is safe and ethical for you to do so. Put on some long johns and go rock outside and go freak out with your friends in an icy field somewhere. Put on 5 fucking pairs of gloves if you have to. We can do this and we can do it cute. We can do it smart and we can do it ridiculous. And all at the same, I'm saying that all as good things. We got this, you guys. We got this. Happy winter solstice, happy death, and happy rebirth. Bye for now.